Muy buenas tardes o buenos días, no, buenas tardes ya para todos. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos en otro Conversando con CISOs. Mi nombre es Edgar Rojas, desde acá, desde Estados Unidos. Andrés Almanza, nuestro amigazo del alma. ¿Sigues en Panamá, correcto?
Sí, señor, aquí estamos en Panamá todavía, entonces viendo llover ahora aquí, entonces
Ah,
pues
bueno.
sí,
Andrés siempre nos da
el restatus del clima, ¿no?
exacto, retrato del clima. Y hoy el invitado especial es un amigo TK Keanini, es el CTO de Cisco Secure, y vamos a conversar con él. Tiene una carrera muy interesante y vamos a conversar con él acerca del tema de Zero Trust Networking, el tema de las estrategias que deberíamos estar ya considerando en ese tema, pero regresamos a ese momentito. El 3 de diciembre, como ven detrás mío, está
Viernes.
ya el viernes, ya en 2 días, está la primera conferencia de criptomonedas, CryptoConf. Muy interesante el tema que vamos a conversar ahí acerca de criptomonedas, de blockchain, de NFTs. Así que regístrense, gratuito, nos acompañan el viernes un par de horas y vemos cómo nos va. Y luego, obviamente, el 15 y 16 de diciembre regresamos con el Tactical Edge. Tenemos colegas de TK, tenemos a Wendy Nather. TK, Wendy Nather is going to be with us in Tactical Edge, December 15th.
Awesome.
Yeah, so tenemos a Wendy Nather, tenemos a Bryson Board, tenemos una invitado muy especial. No voy a decir su nombre, el apellido, pero Peter Caluca Maris, tengo que averiguarme cómo pronunciar. Él fue el que diseñó el MITRE Defend Network Framework. Y él va a estar con nosotros, Andrés, hablando acerca del MITRE Defend Framework, que ya hablamos nosotros. Así que la invitación es que nos acompañen, se registren, tacticaledge.co. Y bueno, entonces ahora hablamos con TK, vamos a inglés. TK, welcome to Conversando con CISOs. This is all Spanglish.
Thank you.
No, thank you. So you're based out of Austin. That's where we met a few weeks ago, correct? In a nice event organized by our friend Wendy Nather. So it was a pleasure meeting you there. And TK has a fantastic career. He was the CTO of a company called Landcope, and a lot of us in networking probably remember the company. I know that I do. And TK, the funny thing about that company and what we're going to talk about Zero Trust Network is Landcope focused on capturing traffic, capturing information, right? So that we will get to know our network. And that was how long ago have we been saying that from the networking industry?
At least early 2000s, you know, people were eager to detect attackers on the network, but the secondary effect was just having a general ledger, you know, to understand all the activity, so that when bad things happen, they could retrospectively go back and review. You know, it seems like a simple concept. I mean, nobody would run a business without a general ledger, but there really wasn't a general ledger for the network, right? For activity. And that led to, you know, stuff like behavioral analytics and things that weren't signatures. And that's really what really brought Landcope and Stealthwatch to the forefront was, you know, signatures weren't enough.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. But and again, it's since the early 2000s, right? From the networking perspective, the message is always know your network, know your traffic, know what the heck is going on in your network. Now it's 2021. We're at you know, recovering from COVID last year.
Omicron now.
and now we have the new version, the 2022, you know, COVID version 2.0 coming up. So this is going to continue. It's just going to, you know, work from home, and the perimeter of the network is going to continue expanding and extending, and new solutions, new equipment is coming into our networks. So this thing about zero trust, what is it? Zero trust network, zero trust access, or just zero trust? What are we calling it now? Because almost every month there's a new name for zero trust something. So what do we call it?
Yeah, I think the best label is a zero trust architecture, because it truly is an architecture. It probably is going to involve multiple vendors, multiple products. And then the question is, how fit are you to have a zero trust architecture? That's sort of the technical side of it. The business people have to know what they want out of it. In this case, as you described, remote work is very important now, being that we're living in a pandemic. But when you say you have to know your network, not all the networks now are your own. So you have to actually definitely you have to know your business, but some of the pieces and parts that are part of your business are not under your administrative control. So I think zero trust really comes to the forefront because it exemplifies the concept of least privilege. And that's really what it is in practice when you say you have a zero trust architecture.
Right. Yeah. Right. Because every time you read about this thing, the white papers, the Foresters, the Gartners, or you watch videos, by Cisco, by SANS, and everything, they always talk about limiting the access, identifying your users, identifying the groups, and what they have access to, and then giving them, the privileged access. Now, in the and as you remember, in Beyond Trust was with us in Cisco Latin Summit, talking about privilege access management, right, with their PAM solution, right? And they were saying it's like, you have to do it, you need to do it, you need to embark on this road, basically. It's not a question of whether, let me think about it, I mean, at this point, you definitely need to already start doing something to get you closer, right, in the road of accomplishing a zero trust. So, TK, in your experience as the CTO of Cisco Secure, do you find that the majority of the clients have already started on this road, and or are there still some that are like, well, we're still thinking about it?
It's all over the map. I think what the pandemic and the idea of remote work and all these things really did change things, right? Even the people that were dragging their feet and just wanted to live in sort of the old ways of doing security architectures, they were pulled up forcibly, because the work isn't a place you go anymore, right? And so I think that was a big driver, and we saw a lot of change in 2020. If I were to look at all the customers that I speak to, large and small, the one thing that I think does well, if I were to pick a trait for performance, is the companies that honestly know what they want as an outcome from zero trust. They're able to articulate that really well. Like, I want a zero trust architecture because, and they're able to articulate that not only that well, but they're able to get these zero trust concepts like least privilege and really make it their own. And they're proud of their own zero trust architecture, and they should be.
Yeah.
The ones that I think aren't doing so well is where they really don't understand the concepts or what they want out of it, and frankly, they just go into it blindly.
That's usually a big no-no, right? You don't go into a big project, because zero trust architecture, it's a humongous project.
It's end to end. Yeah.
It's incredible. It's not an easy thing, because again, the first thing that the first part of what I've been reading and learning about zero trust and listening to experts like you and others, is the first thing is you need to inventory your users, inventory your applications, inventory your access. Now, as a business, as a community, we keep saying the same thing over and over again from a security perspective: inventory. So we know it's not an easy thing to do, but it's something that needs to be done. And at least from security perspective, it doesn't have to be complete because we cannot eliminate every single, issue or threat, but we can definitely mitigate those risks, right? So that should be something. So when you speak with the clients, right, what is the most common misstep? And I'm not going to say mistake because, as we said before, right, if you already embarked on that road of implementing or creating a zero trust architecture strategy, you already are in the path. But what is the most common misstep that a lot of these clients have done? And I think one you already mentioned, probably, going in blind, not understanding what is it that they want to solve.
Yeah, I think there is a sequence of steps, and if you skip some of the fundamental ones, you basically have to go back and redo it. The first step I always see is really them getting their identity structure together. Moving to multi-factor authentication and really getting the identity of the user locked down, because in the end, the business is having authenticated users, the trusted users, and have some entitlement so they can do their job, right? And so it does start. Identity has really become the new perimeter.
That's good. And we've heard, Andres, in our shows, in the tactical edge events, we have people like SailPoint, we have people like Netscope and others like that, right? That they talk about, and ForgeRock, that they talk about the identity and establishing an identity governance.
Right.
Right. Okay. So that should be one of the first place. Yeah.
You really do need to start there. And so once you have that with strong multi-factor, then you can kind of move on and address the other first class objects, which is, in some cases, it's a matter of inventorying all of the important applications to the business. And then it's about making sure that the good guys have access to those and that the bad guys don't, right? So that's really, at a high level, security is very asymmetric that way, which is you want the authenticated users to have a very usable system, and you want the bad guys, the unauthenticated people, to have a very difficult time.
Yes,
right?
Exactly. And this thing about inventory applications at the beginning, everyone will say, "Oh, that is so difficult. That's so difficult." But you and I and Andres and a lot of the people, the CISOs that are with us, we've been involved in projects, right? When we're moving to cloud, we need to identify which applications we're going to be moving to cloud. So we already done a lot of that stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know what? You got bigger problems than zero trust if you don't know what applications are important to your business. Then you don't even know your business at that point, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I think there's another side to it too. When I say making zero trust your own, in some companies, it is really as simple as making sure that the workers, the employees, have the tools they need, contractors have the tools they need, and you're done. In some cases, though, it isn't about the application. It's the application might not be known actually. So for developers, let's say you're a big developer house, right? The developers they haven't even written the application.
Right.
So for them, zero trust for them is more of a networking. They want access to a pod and a set of resources that actually might not be an application. So again, you have a user that is a developer, and they may have access to 3 or 4 subnets and a few resources, but then it isn't really an application game there. I guess what I'm trying to say is you have to really make zero trust your own and understand what your users need, and then treat the whole thing as least privileged, meaning they have access to that and only that.
Okay, interesting. And that goes also for access to equipment as well, right? I mean, it's just not applications, but also to assets, correct?
Yeah, I would say that, the first class objects would be users, applications, devices, certainly devices. These all are special in the way that, you not only have to test their integrity at runtime, but you really have to test their integrity over the session. So at minute 1, minute 2, minute 3, if for some reason the application, the device, or the user somehow loses their integrity, you may want to re-authenticate them or quarantine them in some really, bad situations. But that's another thing that has really changed the way we do security is, we used to think of, for instance, network access control as something you basically checked at the border, and once you were inside, you're home free, right? You could do anything you want, go nuts. But now it's, now the border's following you.
Yes.
So after 3 minutes go by, you're basically gonna check your integrity too. And that's where behavioral analytics and things come into play, because trust isn't a one-time state anymore. It's actually a rate.
Andres, are you taking notes of all of this stuff? Let's say mute.
That I say that yes, I take a note. 2 questions really, but I would like to wait a little bit more because our philosophical questions maybe, and I want to continue with this great conversation.
Okay, cool. No, but I just want to make sure that you're taking notes because he's giving us a whole bunch of really good stuff. I'm like, oh my God.
Yes, totally agree. For that reason, it's a great conversation.
Great. So, all right. So identity, structure, and then the first class objects as the second step, inventory that. What will be the next phase?
Well, again, in simple terms, most of the people implementing a zero trust architecture are really just concerned about making sure users have access to applications. But like I said, the integrity of the device, very important. The integrity of the infrastructure is incredibly important, right? All of these things, again, are important, not at just time of connect, but all through the session. So that's really, I think, the new thing is, before it was about checking, just as you entered the network, and once you were in there, you inherited all the trust.
Right.
And even the funny thing is, when you look at all the practices around, even in the physical world, around how we're dealing with COVID, a lot of the better practices are very much zero trust. Right? It's not about just testing you when you enter the country, but 10 days after you entered the country, you may have to submit another test.
Right. You know what? That is absolutely true, right? The infamous quarantine, and stay by yourself 7 days and do the test again. It's also zero trust. Yeah. Verify and then continue trusting, verifying the trust.
You have evidence. You have evidence of the trust, right? It's nothing's really inherited anymore. Yeah. And I think that those days are gone, honestly, both physically and digitally. Back in the day, you would build an infrastructure that was solid and trusted, and any application you put on it, you would inherit that trust. Not the same anymore. My application that runs primarily for the business might be running on somebody else's infrastructure now.
Exactly.
Right? What am I inheriting? That's actually really the concept of zero trust. I cannot have trust unless I really have explicit evidence of that trust.
Holy, look at Andres. Andres' head is exploding.
That I say that this is one of the philosophical concepts that I say that today maybe it's a challenge. Because for example, if you are now and you understand that agile, one organization must be agile. But agile means that have to trust. But for the other side, you don't have to trust.
Yeah. So
this is a challenge, a philosophical challenge that you have in your mind all the time when you stay, because zero trust, totally agreed. Many times we say with Edgar that it is a concept, it's not a technology, it's not a machine. Many people think, oh, okay, I want zero trust, but no, okay.
Yeah, where do I buy it?
For that reason, I think that your appreciation about zero trust is an architecture, is a good start to start in a mindset, not in a technology.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Architecture mindset. This is a mindset. This is not a technology. And with this, you change, of course, your path of implementation of this concept in your organization. Right. But at the same time, with the movement, with these steps, you can find challenge. For example, this agile versus trust. Agile versus zero trust.
So that's a question because
agile. Yes, how to be agile. Do you mean that they have a challenge there, agile versus zero trust? How do you resolve this?
Yeah, you know, the whole agile methodology is really it also has conceptually a very zero trust economy. Okay, and what I mean by that is when you take agile versus waterfall. In waterfall, you're actually placing a really big bet. Okay, and at the end of, let's say, 3 to 6 months, you're going to see whether that bet pays off or not. Okay, if it doesn't, frankly, if it does, everybody wins. If it doesn't, though, you've lost 6 months. Okay, in agile methodology, the most you can lose is a week's worth of work. Okay, because you basically are working on iteration. So you're working on smaller bets, right? And with smaller bets, you can take more risk, frankly. So basically, let's actually spend a week doing this. Oh, did it work out? Are we headed towards that goal? Yes, we are. Okay, continue on. If not, change course, right? Whereas that it's like a guided missile versus doing calibration versus a big cannonball that is just it's going to leave the muzzle and it's going to hit the destination, but there's no correcting it along the way.
So is that a good way of looking at establishing zero trust architecture in a company? Let's just do it piece by piece.
Yeah, well, the concept that I'm trying to carry over there is in zero trust, instead of making a big bet, like the entire internal network versus the external network, right? Okay. You literally are betting on session by session. Okay. I mean, if a user were to go rogue and you have a very good zero trust architecture, frankly, nothing's trusted. So if they go rogue, it might be a few applications that have a attack surface. They don't have access to everything, right? It's not like they're wandering internal network and they can have, I'm an HR person gone rogue and now I'm trying to, get at the source code repository. That's never going to happen in a zero trust architecture because everything's limited in a least privileged manner, right?
Okay. Se nos está yendo. Bueno, no sé si le falló el internet. Pero bueno, Andrés, espectacular lo que nos está diciendo. ¿Estás en mute? Espectacular, sí. Lo que nos está diciendo hasta el momento. El tema me gustó mucho el tema que dijo al final de la revisión continua. Una vez que tú tengas y te identificaste y y que has autorizado, te sigue revisando con la idea de que he's back. Okay. Mm-hmm. You're on mute.
My apologies.
That's okay. Zero trust, baby.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. No, we were just saying that this idea of the monitoring of the behavior. So let's go back to that one because that is a fantastic topic because people think that once you set up, as you said, once you set up the identity and blah, 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 that you're done. And it's like, no, that's just the beginning. Now you've identified and now let's continue with the behavior. Is that where technologies or solutions like UABA or however you pronounce it comes into play?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, it comes back to it comes back to a philosophical thing, which is how do I know an object? Okay. And if that object is a user, I may know it because of the attributes, like the name or, how the characteristics of it. If something has a bill and feathers and web feet, I can say duck. Okay. Now, if something is to know it behaviorally is different, right? It eats bugs. Let's say it quacks. It likes the water and it flies. I may have a category of bird, but I may not be able to say duck, right? Unless there is a behavior that is unique to the duck, right? So a lot of times when you're doing behavioral analytics, you might get to a class. Like I might be able to say, oh yeah, you know what, I'm certain that's Chrome. I don't know which version of Chrome, but I'm certain it's Chrome, right? Okay. Or I know that's an IBM ThinkPad, but I'm not really sure if it's an X1 or something, right? And so there's this level of specificity that you have to just accept. Sometimes you're going to know it generally and behaviorally, or sometimes there's something very specific that it does. Now, what's interesting about behavioral analytics is when you identify something, let's say I'll use this example. Okay, if I show you a knife out of my kitchen, you'll look at it and you say, oh, that's definitely a chef knife. Okay, because it has a certain shape. The blade is so long, it has a certain type of handle. It's not a cleaver, it's not a paring knife, it's a chef knife. Okay, just by saying that, you've actually accepted a behavioral model by default, right? Who's going to use it? Probably a chef, probably somebody in the role of a chef preparing a meal, right? If I see that knife being used to prepare a meal, not a big deal, right? However, at Tuesday night, if that's used as a murder weapon, it's the same knife. Okay? It's the same chef knife, but the behavioral profile is completely different. Right?
So the context is different. Exactly.
Absolutely, the behavioral context.
Exactly.
Right. And the more compliant use case would be if for instance somebody was asked to leave a flight because they had a chef knife in their purse. It wasn't even used, but it's inappropriate for that to be in that space, right? And we deal with this on networks a lot, right? If you have identified that this is a printer, and on Tuesday that printer starts acting like a vulnerability scanner, you got an issue.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing what we were talking before, right? So I'm here in the States. I'm in Tennessee today, and tomorrow, all of a sudden I connect from Santa Marta because I'm in the CISO Latam Summit, right? So it's like behavioral analytics, or the behavioral part of Zero Trust definitely needs to catch that on, and it will guarantee that it will catch, and it will ask the questions, what the heck? Is this real Ed? I mean, he is connecting from his laptop.
Right.
Right. But is this Ed? So at that point, that's when you start the whole process of verify yourself again. We think you're Ed, but go ahead and do it.
And the whole concept of least privilege basically gives you a smaller search space, right? So for instance, if Ed is, in the role of a producer of this type of material, then they have access to this, and this. You almost inherit a behavioral profile. Now, if for some reason during this session, you get on a laptop and you start, searching the source code repository or the HR database, I mean, that's an anomaly that need. So what I'm saying is that, when you implement a zero trust architecture, it becomes a lot more evident actually when behavioral profiles are being violated.
Okay, interesting. So that's when we go at the beginning, the first phase, where we identify the users, right? And then we marry that to the first class objects, because then we'll say, okay, these users belong to this group, and this group will have access to this, this, and that.
Exactly.
So then we can, at that point becomes a technology issue, right? We start using technology where we create the access policies, but we start going at a macro level, correct? We don't go at the little micro. That comes later as the solution matures.
That's right.
Look who's with us, Ryan English. Least privilege making my search space smaller for an hour. Exactly. This is what we were talking to Ryan 2 or 3 weeks ago, right? About if you make your environment, very controlled and that you know exactly what the environment looks like, any small activity is going to come out, big sirens blaring, and it's like, whoa, what's going on? But again, to get to that level, it takes a while. It's more maturity, right? You need to start, again, understanding. So the first thing is, when you start with on the road to a security zero trust architecture, you really don't need to know 100% the type of traffic on your network, but you do need to know how your network functions, how your business functions, correct?
Yeah. So this is a very important point. Okay, when you're building your architecture, there are going to be things and for instance, you may know your employees and their roles. You know this a priori. You know this before you even implement policy. So you can actually write policy to what is humanly knowable at the time. Okay. Right now, there is also stuff you don't know. So my point about being network centric versus app centric, it might be that, for instance, I don't know the applications, right? I got a herd of developers. They're actually developing applications. I know the networks, but I don't know the applications. I can't write a policy for applications if I don't know them, right? So that initial policy that you implement is really on the knowledge you have about your business and, frankly, what normal is to you. Now, fully accepting the fact that you're going to learn, actually, through observation, what you didn't know at the time of writing that policy. And so you have to iterate 1 week at a time, right? And make corrections. It might not be a bad thing. You may have just missed something, okay? It might be that there's a user on your network that is both a HR person and a developer. Could happen, but you didn't know that, actually. They wore 2 hats. So you need to go back and iterate your policy. But in the end, it's really, working week by week to really refine what resources are being used by what agents, the users or even machines.
So in a zero trust architecture, then the type of access or the default access is deny, correct? It has to be deny.
Love it.
Right, just like a firewall, deny all at the end, right? Deny any.
Yeah, deny any log.
Yeah, and make sure it's the last one, right? Make sure you don't move it up here.
I mean, it's that which is not expressly permitted is prohibited.
It's prohibited, exactly. So as a CISO, right, these are decisions that you don't make, right? This is why when we're talking about a zero trust architecture, it needs to be viewed from a business perspective. As you said, right, you need to know what your business is. You need to know what it is that you're trying to resolve. In this case, 2020, nobody knew anything about, remote access. 2021, we had COVID version 2 coming out, right? Mm-hmm. So now we have more experience now as exactly what we need and what worked and what didn't work. So now, from a business perspective, we are better prepared to deal with other black swan effects, right? But again, this is where you work with the business, with the other C-level executives. As a CISO, you cannot go on your own and make these decisions on your own because it's basically a career killer for you.
Well, and that again, I mean, before you start on this zero trust architecture journey, what do you want out of it?
Exactly.
I mean, what outcome are you searching for that you don't have today? So, you know, you want the internet to be your network? Okay, that's an outcome. You want the cloud to be your data center? Sure, we can do that, right? You want any device to be a valid working device given its integrity? Okay, we can accomplish that. And frankly, you know, you want, you know, identity is honestly the biggest concept in zero trust, not only for the user, but for the application and for the device. Is you want strong evidence, frankly, that user is in fact who you expect it is, and that the integrity is strong. You can say the same for applications, you can say the same for devices. Once you have that level of integrity, then you can start making some solid policy.
Exactly.
If you lose that integrity, frankly, you got to adjust that policy quick.
Right. Because at that point you become an inhibitor to the business, and you become a roadblock. So at some of my clients, right, I know one in particular, doing the planning for future, right? Because a lot of these issues, we all do that, right? We're going to do this project, and they had something to do with identity. They had another one to do with inventory. They had another one to do with intelligent SOC. By default, intelligent SOC will be a CM solution with user behavior analytics, right? But they were looking at it as three different components. This is where I suggested to them, why don't we look at this as the umbrella is your zero trust architecture, correct?
Beautiful.
And then all of this will be the stages, and we know the first phase is identity. So now we know by default our priority is this one. That's the proper way of approaching this?
Yeah, I mean, you know, all architectures are horizontal by nature, right? I mean, you're assembling a band of musicians, not solo musicians, right?
Right.
And everyone has a role.
Including the bassist, right?
Or the drummer, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's really the way you have to approach architectures. Is you want a very balanced and sustainable ecosystem.
Yes.
Right. So if for instance you're building a system that is going to deliver strong identity for your business, frankly, a lot of other parts of the business can leverage that. You know, they don't have to build it on their own. Right. And frankly, you know, parts of a solid zero trust architecture is going to apply to maybe another part of the business has some kind of, you know, SASE objective, or maybe an XDR objective. Frankly, there's components that are usable, right? Don't let them build it on their own, please. I mean, that's just waste.
Yeah, exactly. Because a lot of them, I mean, I was just thinking, you know, when we're talking about, you know, in the previous episode, we're talking about SOC and intelligent SOCs, and, you know, bringing AI and machine learning, which is definitely part of this whole infrastructure. And yes, everything at the end has to do with identity, right? The intelligent SOC with user behavioral, you have to have a way to map that user identity. So if you go to a client, TK, you go to a client tomorrow, and you see that they're pretty much advanced because they went on their own to do the SOC, the intelligent SOC V3, and you realize that maybe they didn't pay too much attention to the identity part. Do you tell them stop this and go here, or do you tell them, hey, you know, let's consider this and don't stop, but start implementing this? I mean, what's your approach in that? Because I know that. Go ahead.
With something as important as identity, chances are some other part of the business has solved it. Okay, because it's really tough to operate digitally if you don't have strong digital credentials, right? And so chances are it's been solved somewhere else. Frankly, if it hasn't been solved, which is very, very rare, then it needs to get solved, because again, we are mapping ourselves and our businesses into the digital realm, right? And the integrity of that representation is incredibly important, whether we're talking about users or applications or anything else, or even money.
Right. No, that's a great point. Because a lot of the time we forget, right? Because we're CISOs, we think that we own everything, right? And a lot of the times, like, no, you just own. You don't even own. You're in charge of maintaining, security and privacy. So this type of projects will force you to establish those communication channels with other groups, other C-levels, right? Because again, as you said before, and you said it very eloquently, right? Security, zero trust architecture is a business. It's a business initiative. It's not a technical initiative.
Yeah. Chances are that sometimes the organizational structure mimics the information architecture, and vice versa. Sometimes you can look at an information architecture and almost guess what the org chart looks like, right? Or even the communication channels. And when things are really working in harmony, I would say that technical architectures are very much in harmony with social architectures, right? Because honestly, if you're a leader of security, it's a very social process. Whether you're trying to convince somebody that they really shouldn't do that, or you're trying to help them, and work with law enforcement because something really bad happened. But it's a very human scale issue. So I know we talk about bits and bytes and blockchain and all this digital stuff, but we cannot forget that a lot of what we do really is at the boundary of our social processes.
Wow, a whole bunch of T-shirts there. Boundary of our social processes. That's beautiful. When you go to a client and you start talking, the client calls you, we want to know about zero trust architecture. How do you find them? Do you think, do they usually like, oh my God, I know this is immense, because they understand that it's not a once, there's no technology. I mean, how do you calm them down, and how do you, help them, guide them?
Yeah, I mean, much of it is just trying to meet them where they're at. The whole reason why they're even having the conversation about zero trust, there's a reason it's top of mind. It might be that there's a business initiative, or it's remote work sometimes, that might be what they believe. And then the first thing to do, honestly, is really to define the goal line. What does the business need, honestly? I mean, maybe it's not zero trust.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Or
maybe they already have some aspects of zero, because basically what you're saying, right? If you already have an identity program, you already have a very important part of the zero trust architecture already in place.
Yeah. So that's the thing is not only define what done looks like, but socialize that across the business. Not only the CISO needs to understand that, but the rest of the business leaders need to understand what done looks like, what the outcome is. Right. And then from there, I think you can back into, well, okay, let's say zero trust is really a concept. Then let's go grab these principles. How least privileged is your design, your architecture? How least privileged are your business processes? What are some of the fundamental things? Where are you with strong identity, multi-factor authentication, things like that? Just go through it all, and really, again, in all my practices, it's really trying to get them to not copy somebody. It's a lot. It's a lot like diet. Like I can tell you, everything I do to eat, and maybe I'm getting great results, and maybe that's what you want too. But frankly, you have to become an expert in yourself.
Right.
Like what you eat and how it metabolizes with you is different, and so businesses really need to do that. They need to figure out what it means to them, because they're not Apple, they're not Google, they're not although they hear stories, and that's fine, but how do they make it their own?
Right. So have you ever been to a client where they want to talk to you about zero trust? We need help, zero trust architecture. And you get there and you're like, you already have all the components in there. All you need right now is what you just said at the end, monitoring. You need to add that one little piece, correct?
Almost every time. They have at least one, right? Of some, they have to be doing something, right?
Exactly.
They got bigger problems, frankly, if they haven't happened. But you know, somebody before them, you know, put something in that's absolutely right for the business. It's just you can't do it on its own. It needs other components to fulfill the architecture, and just identifying that shortcoming and giving them a roadmap over, you know, a year or 2 years time, gold.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one of the big messages I wanted to make sure that we take out of this conversation for all the CISOs listening to us. Most of the work has already been done, or a lot of the work has already been done, right? We're not starting from zero. We just need to maybe change the narrative a little bit and then start talking to the business so we can understand more where do the business want to go again in 2022, knowing that there's another black swan coming down the pipe. How do we want to be ready? How do we want to react? How resilient do we want to be? And then based on that, here's how we can help you from the cybersecurity organization. Here's how we can help you achieve that, correct?
Yeah.
But it's much easier than let's start from scratch.
No. I mean, a lot of vendors would like that because they could tell you more stuff. But frankly, you know, at the very least, it's not just the technical side. You know, the business really has to figure out what their zero trust architecture goals are. And that is step one, because then you can map what you have to meet those goals and what you need to go out and get.
And then the last question, once you have this set up for your internal users, now you start moving away to your third-party vendors, correct? Do you start from? No, well, you already started. You already have identity internal. So I mean, because with Andres we were talking about how do we use zero trust for the supply chain security, reducing the risks there, right? So zero trust, if you already have something in place, it can help you in that direction, correct?
Yeah, I do think, I mean, supply chain, particularly mature supply chain infrastructure is very much about risk management, right? Mm-hmm. They're constantly running scenarios if on their supply lines, whether there's going to be shortage, they have plan Bs, plan Cs, they have remediation, you know, all that stuff is a science, right? And frankly, I think information security has a lot to learn from supply chain. So having that conversation with supply chain and making sure that you're aligned on how you think about risk, how you think about integrity, you know, all of those things, I think that's a really good conversation to have, because both sides have a lot of practice to learn from each other.
Yes, perfect. TK, I know you're extremely busy, and I know you have back-to-back meetings, so really appreciate you being here. Definitely on my list to bring you to Colombia next year for the CISO Latin Summit. Imagine, Andres, all the CISOs sitting on a table with TK and talking about, you know, here's how what we're doing right now with our zero trust architecture. What do you think? And that's gold right there. I mean, that'll be amazing. And then we'll bring a bass, because I want to see you playing bass. It's like really good bassist.
I'll probably bring my surfboard too. But
there you go. I didn't feel too much surfing in Santa Marta, but we can do something about it. But TK, thank you so much. Really appreciate it, buddy.
All right, sounds good. Take care.
All right, man. See you later. Andrés, ¿listo, papá?
Listo.
Excelente la conversación con TK. Güey, pucha, aprendimos un montón de cosas aquí.
No, y me hizo crear una pregunta que algún día se la haré, y es si cuando está bien el tema de los negocios, pero esto me llevó a pensar, leyendo otros artículos que leí recientemente, si esto también podría ser un riesgo, porque podría crear una falsa sensación de seguridad si no se entiende y se construye bien como concepto, ¿no?
Claro, claro, es
Sí.
muy importante, muy importante.
Mm.
Pero mira lo que para todos los que estamos aquí, la verdad, me dejó más tranquilo la conversación con él
Sí,
al saber que la mayoría de los clientes con los cuales él está conversando ya están más avanzados en el tema de Zero Trust
no,
Architecture.
claro, porque eso sí hay que decirlo, como tendencia, Zero Trust ha sido el caballito y 2022 va a ser el año del Zero Trust, en donde escucharemos que muchas organizaciones confiar menos, porque a mí me gustó, por ejemplo, lo que dijo Ryan, de ese ejemplo me lo imaginaba como un hula hula, ¿no? Entre más pequeño tu hula hula,
Claro.
pues menos posibilidades de anomalías vas a tener. Entonces, claro, pues, yo decía, Juan, qué buena analogía esa.
Es mucha.
Sí, va cerrando hasta que tú te quedas con una hula que te queda a la cintura. Si eres muy
Exacto.
delgado, es un hula chiquitico. Si eres un muy gordito,
¿Funciona?
pues
Pero
te funciona.
te queda, es para ti.
Exacto, es para ti.
Exacto.
Es que ese es el punto, es para ti.
Exacto.
No es el de otro ni el otro, sino es el tuyo, ¿sí? Y ahí podría estar inclusive con lo que le preguntábamos del tema de agilidad, porque como es para ti, pues ahí estás tú moviéndote.
Claro, lo modifiques para que te quede, y funcione con tu entorno. Listo a todos, muchas gracias por acompañarnos. La invitación el viernes, en 2 días, tenemos CryptoConf, va a estar muy interesante, de verdad. Este tema de criptomonedas es fascinante, este tema de blockchains es fascinante.
Sí.
Y pega mucho con el tema de ciberseguridad. Y yo sé que en un futuro eso va a ser va a ser parte de lo nuestro.
Parte esencial y yo creo que ahorita...
El tema de UEBA, User Behavior Analysis, va a estar muy, pero muy pegado a soluciones de blockchain, porque tiene que serlo, por el tema y lo mismo el tema de identidad.
Yo creería que el tema de la identidad,
¿Sí o no?
Yo creo que por ahí se va...
Por ahí va la cosa.
Sí, porque sería, o sea, si estamos hablando de un mecanismo que logre tener una confianza plena en la identidad,
100%.
porque yo lo iba a mezclar con lo que está ya, el ruido de la computación cuántica y el cifrado. Entonces, con más veras, este camino, yo creo que va a ayudar muchísimo precisamente para eso.
Va a ser muy bueno. Entonces, la invitación, acompáñenos aquí al CryptoConf el 3 de diciembre, de verdad va a estar muy, pero muy interesante. Y luego el 15-16 de diciembre, tacticaledge.co. Oiga, tenemos unos monstruos.
Sí, a cerrar el año.
Tenemos el jueves unos monstruos y el miércoles y el 16 cerramos con otros monstruos, así que muy, muy interesante. ¿Y sabes lo que quedó chévere?
Qué buenos temas, sí.
Quedó dividido el primer día en inglés y el segundo día en español. Quedó dividido así por defecto, chévere, pero acompáñenos. Y por último, Andrés y todo lo que nos están acompañando, este es el último Conversando con CISOs del año. Así que de verdad muy agradecidos con todos por habernos acompañado durante estos últimos 12 meses. Muy agradecidos, aprendimos muchas cosas en conjunto. Regresaremos en enero. Yo creo que vamos a regresar en una fecha diferente, un horario diferente para acomodar a todos, para que nos acompañen. Y la verdad, muchas gracias a todos. Bendiciones a todos. Andrés.
Cuídense mucho.
Suerte.
Nos vemos el viernes y nos vemos el 15.
Listo. Hablamos pues. Chao a todos.